They said it was suicide when Captain Maya Torres volunteered to fly through Devil's Canyon, a narrow mountain tunnel no F-35 had ever attempted. But when enemy jets closed in on innocent civilians below, someone had to do the impossible. The morning sun cast long shadows across Thunder Peak Air Base as the emergency klaxon shattered the desert silence. Captain Maya Torres was in the middle of her pre-flight inspection when the alarm echoed across the tarmac, sending ground crews scrambling. Where in the world are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments. We honor every warrior out there. And if this story of impossible courage moves you, smash that subscribe button and ring the bell so you never miss another mission. Inside the command center, chaos ruled. Major Sebastian Kane burst through the doors, his face grim as death. We've got a code red situation. Enemy MiG-29 2nd have crossed into restricted airspace. They're targeting the evacuation convoy in Devil's Canyon. The blood drained from every face in the room. Devil's Canyon wasn't just any location. It was a winding mountain pass where thousands of civilians were fleeing the conflict zone. Narrow roads, steep cliffs, and nowhere to hide from aerial assault. Colonel James Mitchell, the base commander, studied the tactical display with growing horror. How many hostiles? 6, confirmed MiG-29 2nd, sir. They're using the canyon walls as cover, making precision strikes impossible for our surface-to-air missiles. Captain Maya Torres stepped forward from the back of the room. At 2'9", she was the youngest pilot in the squadron, with piercing green eyes and an aerospace engineering degree from Colorado Technical Institute. Her simulator scores were legendary, but many questioned whether she had the steel for real combat. Sir, I know those mountains, Maya said quietly. There's a tunnel system through Devil's Peak, an old mining passage that cuts straight through to the other side of the canyon. The room fell silent. Lieutenant Jake Morrison, a veteran with twice her flight hours, shook his head. Torres, those tunnels are barely wide enough for a helicopter. An F-35? That's a death wish. Major Kane pulled up the geological surveys on screen. The tunnel mouth was only 65 feet wide, leaving mere inches of clearance for an F-35 Lightning II's 35-foot wingspan. Worse, the passage twisted through solid granite for nearly 2 miles before emerging on the far side. Impossible, Kane muttered. The margin for error is 0. One wrong move and you're pancaked against rock. But Maya had already run the calculations in her head. Airspeed, angle of attack, G-forces through the turns. It was mathematically possible, barely. Colonel, those civilians have minutes before the MiGs complete their attack runs. By the time we scramble a full squadron and navigate around the mountains, it'll be too late. Colonel Mitchell's jaw tightened. He'd commanded Thunder Peak for 8 years, and every decision carried the weight of lives. Torres, what you're suggesting has never been attempted. We don't even know if the tunnel structure can handle jet wash at that speed. Sir, with respect, we know what happens if we don't try. Outside, the rumble of enemy jets echoed off the canyon walls. Radio chatter crackled with desperate calls from the convoy. Families with children trapped in a killing zone. Lieutenant Morrison stepped closer, his voice low but firm. Maya, I've flown combat missions you've only read about. That tunnel, it's not just dangerous. It's suicide. Maya met his gaze without flinching. Jake, remember last month's training exercise? When everyone said the Cobra maneuver was impossible in an F-35? I made it work because I understood the physics, not just the rules. The memory hung in the air. Maya had executed a maneuver that aviation experts claimed violated the F-35's design limitations, yet she'd pulled it off flawlessly through precise calculation and unwavering nerve. Colonel Mitchell made his decision. Torres, if you're certain about this, I am, sir. Then you're cleared for immediate takeoff. But Maya, if that tunnel shows any signs of instability, you abort. No heroics. We can't save civilians if we lose you in the process. 10 minutes later, Maya was strapped into the cockpit of her F-35 Lightning II. Call sign, Thunder 7. The aircraft's sleek lines and advanced stealth technology made it the most sophisticated fighter jet ever built, but today it would face a test no designer had ever imagined. Thunder 7, you are cleared for emergency departure. Godspeed, Captain. The F-35's Pratt & Whitney engine roared to life, pushing 43,000 pounds of thrust. Maya felt the familiar surge as the jet accelerated down the runway, then lifted into the desert sky. The flight to Devil's Canyon took 12 minutes at full military power. As the rocky peaks loomed ahead, Maya could see smoke trails marking where the enemy MiGs had already begun their deadly work. Far below, a convoy of vehicles crawled along the narrow canyon road, buses full of families, medical trucks carrying wounded, supply vehicles desperately trying to reach safety. Thunder 7. This is Overwatch. We count 6 hostiles operating in attack formation. They're using the canyon walls to mask their approach. Maya banked left, spotting the tunnel entrance carved into Devil's Peak's western face. From this distance, it looked impossibly small. A dark hole in the granite that seemed to mock the sleek fighter jet approaching at 400 miles per hour. Copy. Overwatch. Beginning approach to tunnel entrance. Request all units maintain radio silence during transit. What Maya didn't say was that radio signals wouldn't penetrate 2 miles of solid rock anyway. Once she entered that tunnel, she'd be completely alone. The tunnel mouth rushed toward her canopy. Maya's hands were steady on the controls, but her heart hammered against her ribs. At this speed, she had perhaps 2 seconds to adjust her approach angle. Too high, and she'd clip the upper edge. Too low, and she'd crater into the tunnel floor. "Come on, beautiful," she whispered to her aircraft. "Let's make history." The world went dark. Immediately, Maya felt the tunnel walls pressing in around her. Her wingtips cleared the rocky sides by less than 3 feet on each side. The F-35's navigation lights illuminated jagged granite rushing past at incredible speed. The first turn came up fast, a sharp right bend that the Geological Survey had marked as a 15-degree deviation. Maya rolled the aircraft slightly, feeling the G-forces press her into her seat. Rock scraped against her port wingtip, sending sparks cascading behind her. Breathe, Maya. Calculate. Adjust. The tunnel straightened for perhaps 500 yards, giving her a momentary reprieve. But ahead, she could see where the passage split into a Y-junction. The left branch dead-ended into a collapsed mining shaft. The right branch continued through the mountain, but it narrowed to barely 60 feet across. Maya didn't hesitate. She banked right, feeling her starboard wing kiss the tunnel wall. The aircraft shuddered, but held together. Now came the worst part. A series of S-curves that twisted through the mountain's core. Maya had memorized the survey maps, but flying them in reality was like threading a needle while riding a missile. Left turn, right turn, a stomach-churning climb that pressed her deep into her seat. Then a diving descent that made her feel weightless, despite pulling negative Gs. Her altimeter spun wildly, trying to make sense of altitude readings inside solid rock. Outside, granite blurred past at a speed that would have been terrifying if she'd had time to be afraid. The tunnel walls began to widen slightly, a sign that she was approaching the far end. Maya allowed herself one moment of hope, then saw the problem ahead. The exit was partially blocked. Centuries of weather had brought down a rockfall that narrowed the opening to perhaps 45 feet across. For most aircraft, it would be completely impassable. But Maya Torres wasn't most pilots. She rolled the F-35 into a knife-edge attitude, flying the aircraft sideways through the gap with her wingtips vertical. Rock scraped against her canopy and belly, but she held the impossible angle until bursting into sunlight on the canyon's far side. Below, the enemy MiGs were lining up for another attack run on the defenseless convoy. They had no idea death had just emerged from the mountain behind them. Maya's targeting system immediately locked onto the lead MiG. Her finger hovered over the trigger, but she held fire. 6 against 1, she needed the element of surprise. Thunder 7 to Overwatch. I'm through the tunnel and have visual on all 6 hostiles, engaging now. The first MiG pilot never knew what hit him. Maya's AIM-120 AMRAAM missile streaked across the canyon, finding its target in a ball of fire and twisted metal. The explosion echoed off the canyon walls like thunder. The remaining 5 enemy pilots scattered, their formation breaking as they tried to locate the threat. But Maya was already lining up her second shot. Another missile, another kill. Where the hell did that come from? Crackled over the enemy frequency that Maya was monitoring. Now they knew she was there, but they couldn't believe how she'd arrived. The canyon walls made it impossible for aircraft to approach undetected, except through a tunnel that no sane pilot would ever attempt. The MiGs turned to engage, but Maya had position and momentum. She dove toward the canyon floor, using the terrain to break radar locks, while her own sensors tracked every enemy movement. A MiG-29 appeared in her canopy, pulling hard to get behind her. Maya pulled an impossible vertical climb, her F-35's thrust vectoring nozzles giving her an advantage the Soviet-era fighter couldn't match. She inverted at the top of her climb and dove back down, putting her directly behind the MiG. Fox 2. Her AIM-9 Sidewinder heat-seeking missile found the MiG's exhaust and removed another threat from the sky. 3 down, 3 to go. But the remaining pilots were experienced, and they'd recovered from their initial shock. They formed up in a defensive wheel, making it impossible for Maya to engage one without exposing herself to the others. Maya's fuel gauge was dropping fast. The high-speed tunnel transit and subsequent combat maneuvering had burned through her reserves. She had perhaps 10 minutes of flying time left. Thunder 7, this is Lightning 5. We're inbound from Thunder Peak, ETA 8 minutes. Jake Morrison's voice over the radio was the most beautiful sound Maya had ever heard. But 8 minutes might as well be 8 hours if those MiGs reached the convoy first. The enemy pilots had the same thought. They abandoned their defensive formation and dove toward the road below, intent on completing their mission before reinforcements arrived. Maya had one chance. She pushed her throttles to military power and dove after them, accepting a disadvantageous position to protect the civilians below. The lead MiG was already lining up on a school bus packed with children. Maya didn't have a clear shot, but she had something else, the element of psychological warfare. She triggered her afterburners and screamed past the MiG at barely 100 feet above the canyon floor, her jet wash buffeting the enemy aircraft and spoiling his attack run. The MiG pilot, startled by the F-35's sudden appearance, pulled up sharply to avoid a collision. That moment of confusion was all Maya needed. She pulled a crushing 8G turn that grayed out her vision, but put her directly behind the enemy fighter. Her final aim, 120, found its mark. 2 MiGs remained, and Maya was out of missiles, but she still had her 25mm GAU-22 cannon and 182 rounds of ammunition. The remaining enemy pilots, now desperate, split up to attack the convoy from multiple directions. Maya couldn't stop both of them. She made her choice, pursuing the MiG targeting the medical convoy. Her cannon spat fire, tracers lancing through the desert air. The MiG rolled desperately, but Maya's gunnery training paid off. A burst of 25mm shells shredded the enemy's left wing, sending him spinning into the canyon wall. But the final MiG had used Maya's distraction to line up on a bus full of families. His missiles were armed, target locked. Maya's fuel warning light was flashing red. Her engines were running on fumes. But she didn't hesitate. She aimed her F-35 directly at the enemy fighter and pushed her throttles to emergency power, burning the last drops of fuel in her tanks. The MiG pilot saw her coming, a missileless, cannon-empty F-35 Lightning II flying straight at him like a guided bomb. At the last second, the enemy pilot broke off his attack run, unwilling to trade his life for the mission. He banked hard left, fleeing toward the border. Maya's engines flamed out. Thunder 7, you are Winchester and flame out. Eject immediately. But Maya could see the convoy below. Hundreds of innocent people who were alive because she'd flown through an impossible tunnel and fought against overwhelming odds. She wasn't abandoning her aircraft over their heads. She glided the powerless F-35 toward a flat section of desert, using every bit of her aerodynamic knowledge to stretch the glide. The aircraft touched down hard, bounced twice, and slid to a stop in a cloud of dust and scattered sagebrush. Maya sat in the cockpit for a long moment, hands shaking as the adrenaline finally hit her. She was alive. The convoy was safe. And she'd just accomplished something that would be talked about in aviation circles for decades. Thunder 7, this is Lightning 5. Maya, are you okay down there? Jake Morrison's voice crackled over her radio. She looked up to see 4 F-35 seconds circling overhead, the reinforcements that had arrived just in time to witness her impossible landing. Lightning 5, I'm good. Aircraft is damaged but intact. And Jake? Yeah, Maya? Next time someone says something is impossible, remind them about Devil's Canyon. 3 weeks later, Maya stood before a packed auditorium at Thunder Peak Air Base. The ceremony was being broadcast live to Air Force bases worldwide. On her chest gleamed the Distinguished Flying Cross, the nation's highest award for aerial heroism. Captain Torres, the general said, his voice carrying across the silent room, your actions on the 15th of September represent the finest traditions of military aviation. Flying through Devil's Canyon Tunnel was deemed impossible by every expert who studied it. Yet when innocent lives hung in the balance, you proved that courage and skill can overcome any obstacle. The applause was thunderous. In the front row sat the families Maya had saved, men, women, and children, who owed their lives to a pilot who refused to accept the word impossible. Jake Morrison, now Maya's wingman and closest friend, leaned over during the ceremony. You know, they're already calling it Torres's Run, the tunnel passage. Flight schools are going to study your technique for generations. Maya smiled, but her eyes were on the audience. A little girl in the third row, one of the children from that school bus, caught her eye and waved. Maya waved back, remembering why she'd really made that impossible flight. After the ceremony, reporters surrounded Maya. Captain Torres, what went through your mind as you entered that tunnel? Maya thought for a moment before answering. I thought about the physics. the calculations that told me it was possible. But mostly, I thought about the people counting on me to make it work. Will you attempt the tunnel passage again? Maya grinned. I don't need to. I proved it could be done. Now it's up to the next generation of pilots to prove it can be done better. As the crowd dispersed and the cameras stopped rolling, Maya walked out onto the tarmac, where her new F-35 waited. The aircraft was identical to the one she'd landed in the desert, but it bore new nose art, a lightning bolt emerging from a tunnel, with the words, "Impossible is nothing," painted below. Colonel Mitchell approached, a rare smile on his weathered face. Torres, I've got new orders for you. How would you feel about heading up a new program, training pilots in extreme terrain navigation? Maya looked up at the mountains in the distance, where Devil's Canyon cut through the peaks like a scar. Somewhere in those rocks was a tunnel that had changed everything, for her, for the Air Force, and for everyone who believed that some barriers couldn't be broken. Sir, I'd be honored. As the sun set behind Devil's Peak, Maya climbed into her cockpit for a routine training flight, but she took a slight detour, flying past the tunnel entrance that had made her famous. For just a moment, she considered making another pass through that narrow passage. Then she smiled and headed home. Some records were meant to stand forever. But the legend of Captain Maya Torres, 10 Mayan, the pilot who flew through the impossible tunnel and saved hundreds of lives, would inspire aviators for generations to come. Because sometimes, when everything is on the line, impossible is just another word for untested.